and welcome to the December edition of Celtic Skies Sky Update, your guide to the December skies for the non-astronomer. No prior knowledge or equipment is required to watch, learn from and hopefully enjoy this blog. From time to time, I may use a phrase or refer to some phenomenon that you are not familiar with. Some of these I'll explain as we go. For others, you will see this appear on the screen, a search box with the phrase in it. After the video, if you want to get more information, go to the blog's homepage where you'll find the search box, type in the phrase and click search. A brief video, usually between 60 to 90 seconds long, will appear, which will give you some more information. So this month we'll be looking at the phases of the moon, the winter solstice, the planets, the constellation Orion or the Hunter, and finally, in the lead up to Christmas, if you're thinking of buying a telescope, I have a few tips for you. So without further ado, let's crack on. This month's lunar phases occur on the following dates. The first quarter is on the 7th, we'll see the full moon on the 14th, the third quarter on the 21st, and the new moon on the 29th. As in November, the December full moon will be a supermoon. And a supermoon is when the moon is going through the full moon phase while it is at the closest point to the Earth, and thus appears bigger and brighter than normal. This is definitely one to look out for. The Earth, like all planets, has two basic movements. One is to rotate around an apparent axis, which goes through the planet from the South Pole to the North Pole. This spinning effect gives us day and night. The other movement is its orbit around the Sun, which defines our year. You will note in the diagram that the axis around which the Earth spins is at an angle to the plane of its orbit. So this means that, in an effect, it's often either tilted towards the Sun or tilted away from the Sun, depending on its location in its orbit. And this tilt towards or away from the Sun has a significant impact on the climate of the planet. Consider two people, one standing in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern hemisphere. As the Earth rotates about its axis, they both spend time in the light, daytime, and in the dark, nighttime. However, as you can see, in the northern hemisphere, more time is spent in the light than in the dark. This means that the days are longer and the nights are shorter. Conversely, in the southern hemisphere, the nights are longer and the days are shorter. This has the effect of warming the climate more in the northern hemisphere and cooling it more in the southern hemisphere. Thus we have summer in the north and winter in the south. Conversely, when the axis appears to be pointing away from the Sun, we have summer conditions in the southern hemisphere and winter conditions in the northern hemisphere. As the Earth continues its orbit around the Sun in the first few weeks of December, the angle its axis makes away from the Sun continues to increase. Therefore, the days continue to get shorter and the nights longer in the northern hemisphere. However, it reaches a point where the axis is at its maximum angle away from the Sun, and as the orbit continues, the axis starts to tilt back towards the Sun. At the point of maximum angle, we call it the winter solstice. This is when the days are at their shortest and the nights are at their maximum. In December, we reach the winter solstice on December 21st at 10:44 precisely. And even though it'll take a while for us to notice it, the days are starting to get longer and we start the slow journey towards summer. December is not a great month for the novice to try and identify planets from the stars in the night sky. Your best chance is probably sometime during the morning of the 23rd, when Jupiter will be very close to the Moon and will be easily identifiable as the very bright star, or what looks like a bright star near to the Moon. Jupiter will actually rise at 2 in the morning, and about a half hour later the Moon will rise just behind it. They will continue to rise in the sky, and the best time to try and see them is probably at about 6:45 in the morning. If you consider the horizon as 0 and above your head is 90 degrees, they will be at about 30 degrees. And the sun will have yet to rise, so you should be able to see the Moon and more specifically Jupiter quite easily. So this again is your opportunity to identify a planet, the planet Jupiter. 6:45 onwards, the sun starts to rise, and within half an hour the sky will be too bright to try and identify Jupiter. So if you want to see a planet, try getting up early on the morning of the 23rd.
This month's constellation of interest is Orion, the Hunter constellation. Last month we looked at the Plough and how we can use it to identify Polaris, the North Star. Polaris can be viewed to the north, and if you turn around you will see Orion in the southern sky. To the ancients, when the stars are linked together in a line drawn, it reminded them of a hunter, and so it's also known as the Hunter constellation. Right beside it, rising shortly after Orion, is Ceres, the dog star, so called because it's part of the constellation Canis Major, the greater dog. Ceres is well worth looking at as it's the brightest star in the sky. It dwarfs our sun, and if they were side by side, it would shine 25 times brighter. If you look closely, you will note a cluster of stars in Orion, just below the three belt stars. In fact, the middle star is not a star at all. It's a huge nebulous cloud, more than 20 light years in diameter. The gaseous cloud is where stars are formed in their thousands. It's a stellar nursery where new stars and possibly new planetary systems are being created, all in that shiny dot in the sky. The Orion Nebula is about 1,340 light years away. That means that it takes 1,340 years for light from the cloud to reach your eyes here on Earth. So you're not seeing that cloud as it is now, but as it looked 1,340 years ago, as it looked back in 676 AD, little over 40 years after Muhammad died and the completion of the Quran. Science, history and the creation of life all wrapped up in a single constellation.
Some of you may be considering purchasing a telescope for yourself or a loved one this Christmas. Well, there's a few things you should look out for. Now, nobody would get toy tools mixed up with real tools. You wouldn't expect that you can go out and put a picture up or make a cabinet with the toy hammer, saw or pliers that you buy in a toy shop. Toys are toys, equipment is equipment. You wouldn't mix them up. But when it comes to telescopes, it's not often as easy to tell one from the other. And unfortunately, some outlets will try and sell toy telescopes and pass them off as real telescopes. How can you tell the difference? Well, if you're buying a telescope for under €50, you're definitely buying a toy telescope that cannot be used to look at the sky realistically. In fact, entry-level, very basic level telescopes will cost between €100 and €200 at a minimum. There may be one or two models that might be around the €90 mark, but in general, if you're spending under €100, I would question the quality of the telescope. Secondly, Toy telescopes usually talk about magnification on the box, and it's all about magnification. A real reputable company selling a telescope will talk about the objective lens, how wide it is, and light capture, sturdiness, optic qualities. These are the key words that you want to see on the package and what people talk about. Another thing is the mount. We often concentrate on the telescope, but the mount, the tripod on which it stands, can be just as important. And invariably, toy telescopes, if you look at them crooked, they will wobble, which makes them useless for looking at the sky. Whereas real telescopes, proper telescopes, have sturdy tripods that you can turn and manipulate without the whole apparatus shaking. So these are indications of what toys are and what equipment are. And please don't buy your children toy telescopes expecting them to use them as real telescopes. You'll only kill their enthusiasm and they will get bored very, very quickly. Reputable brands of telescope include the likes of Celestron, Meade, Skywatcher. It is always good to deal with a reputable and experienced retailer of telescopes. I would recommend you would search on Google for your local Celestron, Meade or Skywatcher agent and just put in your location. For Ireland, a good outlet is K-Tech Telescopes. I have no connection or interests with the shop, I just know them to be a good and reliable outlet. So if you're unsure, find a good outlet supplier and they will help you in your purchase. Well, that's it for another month. I hope you found the blog enjoyable and informative, and I hope that on a clear night you get the opportunity to go out and have a look at what a wonderful sky we have above us. It's free to look at and it's fascinating. And so until next month's Celtic Skies Sky Update, I wish you clear skies and a happy and peaceful Christmas.